All right, it is the offseason. We welcome you to 310 to Left here on the NESN Podcast Network. Alex Spear taking some much-needed time off. He works too hard. We don't. We're just part-time TV slackers, so we welcome you, Tom Caron, along with Lou Merloni this week. Lou, how you doing?
I'm good, TC. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Watching the playoffs like you. I feel some years I can kind of just watch it as a fan, and I don't, think about the Red Sox. I'm watching every pitch, and every pitch I'm thinking about the Red Sox because I'm thinking they should be there. They could be there. These teams aren't that much better, certainly in the American League. And so and more than anything, there's absolutely no excuse not to have a team that can go deep into the playoffs next year. How do you watch these playoffs? Where do you fit in as far as how you feel about the Red Sox when you watch these games?
Yeah, I agree, especially in the American League, because you look at the American League, there's no 100-game winner. There was no just juggernaut. The Yankees had the highest record, most win total, 94, and you just looked around, you played all these teams all year long, and you're like you said, why not us? It's kind of like, they're not that far off from the teams that are in the postseason. Now, I feel like the National League's a different animal. Like, when I'm watching San Diego and the Dodgers, I'm like, you're not in that league. You aren't. And the way the Mets are playing, and the Phillies even with the talent. But the American League in particular, that's where it gets frustrating. And you're right. I think they're close. There's just a lot of work they got to do in this offseason.
Yeah, 20 years ago, why not us meant winning the World Series. Now, 20 years later, why not us? Just get in. Just get in.
Yeah.
But that's the format, right? The format does reward teams who just get in. You no longer, winning the division's nice, although still these teams struggle after all the 5 days off clearly doesn't help them any. But just getting in is the goal now, right?
And that's what we've seen the last 2 years in the playoffs. Contrary to popular belief, it's still the toughest league in all of sports to make it into the postseason. The NFL's got 7, NHL's got 8, NBA's got 10 in each conference. Baseball has 6. And so it's important, even if you're a game or two out, to just get in. We've seen it the last few years. And you look at 2021. I can't remember more fun at Fenway Park than we saw in 21. You get in there, you win a series or two, you're in the ALCS. That's excitement. And by the way, it's also experience. You watch a lot of kids right now in the postseason getting that first taste of it, coming out of the bullpen, not throwing strikes or pressing at the plate. Maybe their team doesn't win it, but next year they've been through it. They got something to play off of, and that's important.
Well, the Red Sox fit into that group, right? You're talking about a young team that's going to get younger if these prospects come up and become a big part of this. Do they need to go out and add some adults to the room?
Yeah, there's no question about it. You need it. When you look at even like the 2013 team, right? There wasn't like individually, they weren't stars, but they were adults, that went after their job and they went out in a professional way. When you look at this rotation, guys like Bayo, Houck, and Crawford, they need a guy that is so intense with his approach every fifth day. That is, just the way he goes about his job. This lineup needs a JD Martinez like it got in 2018. That is just comes in here in the cage, is so precise in his daily work and how he goes about his job. Like, these are the things that this team needs. They have a lot of great young talent, but now they need some old veterans in the staff, in the pen, in this lineup to kind of gather these guys around and just take them to another level.
All right, 3 of the 4 teams that have made it to the League Championship Series are in the top 5 payrolls in Major League Baseball. I think it would be the top 3 payrolls if the Dodgers were paying Ohtani some of his money now, but they're not paying for a long, long time, as we know. The Guardians are the outliers. We'll get to them, but clearly there is a correlation between teams who spend money on talent, teams who go get the adults, the big free agents that can come in and help a team. Those teams are more likely to make the playoffs, right? It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I do think it's kind of like where you are as an organization, right? Like, you can, in a rebuild, mask it and go sign some players, and I don't think you win a World Series. But when your team is ready, as the Dodgers and the Phillies and the Yankees, and the Mets already bought in, so they kind of kept it going a little bit. I think it's up to you to spend. You got to get back into the top 5 in payroll. You have to, and they've got some money coming off the payroll. They've been under this luxury tax. You've got young players under control for the next 3 years pre-arbitration, 6 years really, some of them. So it's time to supplement that now with some high-priced free agents. I know it's uncomfortable, but that's how this organization has really gone about it and won.
There's been a lot of talk about trading some of the prospects capital, right? That there's surplus position players coming up through the minors. But it's not one or the other, is it? You can't address everything through trades, can you? You still have to dip into free agency.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why it's funny. I asked Breslow, like, is there an order to it? Like, do you dive into free agency for a starting pitcher and then just, Burns wants 10 years and you can't match $300 million, So with that, you then kind of take it to, okay, let's figure out the trade market. Let's address our starting line of pitching through the trade market. So, I don't know which happens first, but I think it is a combination of both. Whether it is sign that big-time free agent, trade for that right-handed bat, it's got to be one or the other. You don't want to just unload everything and try to stay under a payroll, but you don't want to trade away every prospect either and have nothing left.
By the way, the Dogs are well trained. As soon as you say Corbin Burns, they start yapping. They want Corbin Burns, clearly. You have probably heard you say that name a few times.
Yeah, they do. They walk around in little Corbin Burns jerseys. One's got a Max Fried jersey, one's got a Corbin Burns jersey. Yeah, that's how it works.
Hey, you are such a great follow on Twitter during the playoffs. On a particularly good 3-day run the other day, you wanted Tanner Scott, Teoscar Hernandez, and Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, one's under contract, but let's say you could get him anyway. That's according to Sportac, I looked it up, it's $438.7 million that you'd be committing to those three.
Perfect. Perfect. I don't mind it one bit. Like, think about Tatis in between Devers and Casas. He's got, 10 years, $300 million. That's why I was hoping they would win it. Maybe finally win a World Series and then be like, okay, now we've got problems. We've got to trade guys away. Tanner Scott's a no-brainer to me. And it sounds, I keep hearing his name. I heard at the end of the season around Fenway Park, just as far as, like, we need a lefty that it doesn't rely on location to get guys out. We need a lefty that has stuff, that can actually make a mistake, and just his stuff is so good he blows you away. So these are the types of guys, and Teoscar's a guy that, right-handed bat, outfield, DH, whatever it may be. He wanted to be here in the offseason. Maybe you weren't ready then. Maybe you're ready now.
Teoscar Hernandez, we heard so much about last offseason, right? That his interest to come here. We spent the whole winter talking about Jordan Montgomery. I don't know if they were ever really on Imanaga or Yamamoto, probably not, because that got so crazy. But a lot of the guys that we know they were interested in wound up being pretty impactful players. Do you think that kind of shapes Breslow going into this winter? Like, he kind of identified the right guy. He just didn't get him.
Yeah, and I think that comes to the biggest issue, I think, this offseason, TC, and I'm sure you've heard it before, and I think I've heard it enough from many different people to believe it. Breslow's job is to convince John Henry that he needs to spend on a particular guy. He needs to convince him that he needs to make this trade. This is the one that's going to put us over the top or whatever. Like, that's the GM's job here at Fenway Park. Theo could do it. Dombrowski could do it. Charrington Bloom, I don't think so. Can Breslow do it? And you're right. He's identified some guys, some impact guys that they didn't end up getting. But he's also had a run here of, like, the sale trade with Grissom, the deadline, the guys he brought in. So that's not exactly on his side, at least Grissom for the current time, right? Who knows what is long term. But he has to convince John that it's time to do it. Maybe Theo Epstein is sitting on his shoulder helping him out. I don't know. But hopefully they can get that done.
Max Fried seems like a perfect fit, doesn't he? I mean, I know Corbin Burns is Corbin Burns. Anybody who gets Corbin Burns is going to get a stud. We know that. But Max Fried just seems like the kind of guy that this pitching group that we've heard so much about would dig into and just, I don't want to say take to the next level because he's already really good. But that's the kind of guy they need, right?
Yeah, huge upside, right? I mean, he's had some health issues, but throw that out at this point, because who doesn't? Like, the Lucas Giolito thing should tell you everything you know. The most durable starter in all of baseball couldn't get to spring training. So, Fried, it's all about upside. It's all about what he can do every fifth day when he takes the ball. And by the way, it's nice to have a lefty, when you roll into Fenway Park to maybe Yankee Stadium rather, to line him up there. So, yeah, you're right. He's the perfect fit. Like, he's the guy that it'd be nice if you can get him. Of course, Burns is another one. Flaherty's one I'm not really sure about, right? The track record is, like, he's been really good this year. I don't know, do you sign him? He goes back to what he was the previous three, which wasn't good, to the point where the Orioles had to throw him away in the bullpen for the playoffs. So, but those two guys obviously on top of the list.
Well, and again, it's not to talk money, but the problem is he has this really good year, right? So now you're going to buy at an all-time high, right? That like a year
Yeah.
ago, I might have been in on Jack Flaherty because you probably would have gotten him on a discount, or a year and a half ago at the deadline, right? But he's not that guy anymore, and he's pitching the playoffs, and he's probably just going to rise his money up as it goes. If you look at those guys, and here's what I keep coming back to. If Max Fried, Corbin Burns, whoever it is, if you could address your starting pitching needs through free agency, you could really do something by acquiring relief help with some of those trades, right? If you didn't have to bundle up all your prospects to go get a number one starter, it's a lot easier to get bullpen help, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the other thing, too, is like I love depth, right? We've seen it before. It takes more than a 26-man roster and sometimes more than a 40-man roster to get through a season. So if you were to throw some money at, say, like you said, like a Max Fried and a Tanner Scott, which they have. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, what else can we fit? What else are we looking for? Can we make a major trade? And it's just like thinking outside the box at like this great young AAA pitching prospect. You know what I mean? Like for a Abreu or whoever it might be in a package, and all of a sudden you replenish. You got a 6-starter sitting down in AAA that could be lights out in years to come. So there's so much flexibility with what this team can do with money and prospects, because they're all big leaguers, young big leaguers, and AAA prospects, that there's a huge offseason with a lot of big decisions to make.
Is there going to be a bona fide number one closer on this team next year? Is it one guy? And do you think that one guy's here right now?
I think Liam Hendriks kind of puts that in question. So I would like to get another closer and just sort of see how Liam looks, in spring training. Is he back to himself? If he is, great, he can close. The closer you got can go in the ninth. If he's kind of off to a tough start, the closer you sign is now the ninth guy, and he can be the eighth and kind of get his feet wet a little bit. So I think you need them both. I mean, we saw they hit on Martin and Jansen. I mean, they absolutely hit on him. These last 2 years, you didn't make the playoffs. But the one thing you count on with those two guys at the back end of the bullpen, I know Martin had his injuries this year, and Kenley wasn't himself down the stretch. But you absolutely hit him. You needed those guys 2 years ago, not the last 2 years. But they were great, and I think you need the same thing.
The Kenley Jansen sign is going to go down as a weird one in the end, isn't it? I mean, like you said, they hit on him, but they didn't need him. I mean, it was just, that's the kind of signing that a team that is right on the edge of the play, like they never had a playoff game with Kenley Jansen here. When you go back to everything Chaim Bloom did, and I think Bloom did a great job rebuilding the pipeline. I mean, that was his goal, right? And had he made a move or two more at the major league level, I think he may still be here. But he didn't, and here's where we are. But that signing, with everything else that was going on, that the things he didn't do, the players he traded away, that's still it's a head scratcher to me.
Yeah, it is. It's like taking in an offseason when you look at your roster and say, okay, we're not spending money, we have a budget, we're trying to rebuild our system, let's go sign a veteran closer. You only do that, in my opinion, to build up an asset to trade at the deadline. Like the Royals did with Aroldis Chapman, and they got Cole Reagans for him when they dealt him to Texas. That's why you do that. And that never happened. And it's a shame that it didn't happen. I know, you go back to the deadlines, you trade Kenley, you know how you'd feel about it, about the current situation, but it just seems odd, like Kenley's, I don't know, veteran closer like that, a historic one, and he goes to a team that obviously is in a complete rebuild for probably the next year or two. Didn't make any sense.
All right. On the offensive side, obviously we know there are young prospects coming up, and we're going to see more of those guys achieving their promotion in the coming months over the course of 2025. But as you look at it right now, it's left-handed heavy. And Tyler O'Neill, who when was healthy, did a really good job, gave them the right-handed power they wanted, and certainly is a guy who can use Fenway to his strength, which is something this team hasn't done real well in recent years. We haven't seen a lot of Trevor Story. Obviously, that would help on the right-handed side as well. What do you do for right-handed power? Is it O'Neill? Do you qualify him? I don't know if he'd accept it. He's a Boris guy. He's going to want a deal. They said they're going to talk, but I would assume he's going to get some money. What would you do with Tyler O'Neill at this point?
I don't think I'd qualify him. I think it's like $22 million, but it's one of those I would keep having conversations with him because I just think he closes you off with some versatility. All that stuff we talked about with Teoscar Hernandez in the offseason, I don't, in looking back, like I don't know how interested they really were because once you sign Tyler O'Neill, Teoscar's out of the question. Tyler O'Neill's your outfielder. They wanted Abreu in the mix. Duran was in the house, and I think I know the rumors were they had a deal maybe to be made. Maybe they were trading Durant to go get Teoscar. I haven't opened up a spot. But if you sign back Tyler O'Neill, you lock yourself in. Now, if you're able to move Yoshida and slide Tyler O'Neill into a DH spot who can play a little outfield, then I would maybe, I think you would probably want to bring him back. But I just think defensively, you got to do a lot to keep him healthy. Like, I loved him. I love the guy, and when he was out there, obviously he's right-handed power, but you kind of saw his athleticism go down a little bit in the outfield as the season went on. The body was kind of getting grinded a little bit. As a DH, I think he can help you a lot. So it's sort of, you non-qualify him, you see if you can work something out. Maybe you move Yoshida, and then you kind of can work a deal out maybe to bring him back while you still look for maybe another big right-handed bat in the outfield.
And I agree totally, because Yoshida's just an odd fit, right? He doesn't have the power to be a DH, and clearly he's not going to play the outfield here. And they have more outfielders coming. Like, he shouldn't be playing the outfield here. But he's also one of the only contact guys they have, right? A guy who regularly puts the ball in play. Can this current group become more contact driven? I mean, we hear so much about, the drive line philosophy of bat speed, and it's working. If you follow Christian Campbell, like, that's everything he did was following that along the way, right? And that's how he went from outside the top 30 in the Red Sox organization to the number one, minor league player of the year. But doesn't this team have to cut? I mean, you look at most of this year's playoff teams. Most of the field this year, the 12 teams that made it, were almost all in the top half of fewest strikeouts by team in baseball. Red Sox, we know, had the second most strikeouts in the American League, the most with runners in scoring position. Team's got to strike out less next year, doesn't it?
Yeah, they do. And this current group can get a little bit better, and we've seen it before. Some guy, big strikeout guy, maybe over the course of time become better at it. But this is a personnel issue, I mean, when you traded Verdugo, and you gave the job to Wilyer Abreu and went from a guy that struck out 14, 15% of the time to a guy that struck out 28% of the time, when you moved on from Justin Turner, who struck out 15% of the time, and brought in Tyler O'Neill, who struck out 33% of the time, and you knew St. Don Rafaela was going to be in the fold, like, hello, like, what did you expect? Like, you want guys to strike out less? Bring in guys that strike out less. Like, this is like, give me the profile of a player. That was the thing 2 years ago. You knew you had Verdugo. You were hoping Casas was that type of player. You brought in Justin Turner and you signed Yoshida because you needed to make more contact. And you did. Well, you've moved on to your contact guys, and look where you are. And if you do move on to Yoshida, you got to reduce these strikeouts. I mean, you can't strike out 10 times a game. That's not putting any pressure on the defense. They got to get 17 outs. That's it. I mean, it's way too much. But it starts with personnel. And people get on Fatsy all the time about this thing. It's like, dude, it's like the minute the Yankees traded for Verdugo and signed Soto, you knew they were going to lead the league in walks. You knew they were going to lead the league in home runs. It's quality at bats because those two guys give you that. It's about personnel. No great hitting coach. You can take a guy that strike out 33% of the time and turn him into a 15% strikeout guy. They got to get guys that make contact.
There's been a lot of they should trade Triston Casas talk, really, since he came back, honestly. And it makes sense, right? I mean, he's a really valuable asset. But what we've seen of him, that's a lot to give up because you haven't really seen him yet for a year. Do you trade Triston Casas?
I think about it because I think about trading anybody. I think there's pros and cons. I mean, like you said, like he's an impact bat in the middle of the lineup, and there just aren't that many of them. And you've got one, so why would you, right? And he gives you the quality at bat. He draws his walks, and he's got pop. So that's the argument to keep him. The argument against him, for me personally, is games played. As you said, we haven't really seen him for a full season. Well, if you follow him the last 2 years in the minors, you didn't see him there much either. He played like 70 games and 80 games. 2 years in the minor leagues, there was some injury. Last year was fantastic, but he missed all of September, with an injury basically. So this year he had another one. So I think you can go both sides of this thing. Is he a must trade? No, because he's such a valuable asset in the middle of that lineup and an impact bat. But, if you start digging for like starters, if you're not going to sign one and the ask is Casas, you have to start thinking about it.
All right, Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, Kyle Teal, Christian Campbell. We know the names coming up. Who do you want to see when the season begins, or who do you think is going to get is Anthony the first guy who gets a chance to walk through the door? He's the youngest out of all of them.
Yeah, I think it's Campbell. And I'd be more comfortable if they gave Campbell, say, a second base job. Okay, and it's simply about organizational depth. You give Christian Campbell the job. Let's say it's a Jackson Holiday situation. And it's just like, whoa. Maybe not ready. Send him back down for a little bit. You've got Von Grissom. You've got Hamilton. You've got Romy Gonzalez. You've got Cedar Rafaela. You've got guys if it doesn't work out when you bring a kid up. If you make trades and you open up a spot for Roman Anthony to be your everyday outfielder and he struggles, it's the one area you got nothing. You got nothing behind it. Like you got nothing. What do you do? Now all of a sudden you're back. Refsnyder playing every single day. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, as far as organizational depth goes, it's safer to give a job to Campbell because you've got depth there. And then, let these kids start off in AAA. No pressure April. Extended spring training. May. Get their confidence up. Maybe they bust through the door. If there's an injury, you feel good about bringing them up. Maybe they're so good you're forced to make a trade at some point in June or July and better your team for it. So it'll be interesting to what they do, but I just think depth-wise, Campbell makes more sense.
All right, a couple things I want to ask before we wrap it up. They let go 6 coaches. And, these things happen. You don't make the playoffs. You've made it once in 6 years. There's always going to be some moves. But, nobody thinks this was Andy Fox's fault or that Ray Fuentes didn't have him mentally prepared to play the game. When an organization does that, what does it mean? You've been in the clubhouse. What does that send any message to anybody in the clubhouse? What's behind those kind of moves?
I mean, I don't want to diminish the jobs of each of those guys, but when you look at a staff, bench coach is usually your buddy, right? First base coach is an easy fill. It's sort of like, okay, what do we need? We need a base running coach? Do we need an infield instructor at that spot and a bullpen coach? Like, I think it's hysterical that people are actually like, well, they should have fired their bullpen coach because their bullpen was awful. Like, to think that is just remarkable. Like, he's the assistant pitching coach, but Bailey's out there dealing with the bullpen. Like, he's getting them ready, giving them scouting reports, but to put the bullpen on Walker, I think is ridiculous. So I just think it's kind of like fringe moves, Andy Fox has been in the organization a long, long time, first base coach, but a lot of times organizations filled that spot, and they were close. As Alex and Andy were very close, but the infield situation is what it is. It cost Febles his job, which I think is a joke. Because if Trevor Story is healthy next year, and your outfield is rough, and whoever you have at second base or whatever it may be, the infield structure is going to look really good because Trevor Story is your shortstop every single day, right? If Rafaela is at second base, your infield coach is going to be really good because both those guys can pick it. Okay, Trevor Story going down the last 2 years got, Febles and Fox got all the blame for that, which I think is ridiculous. It's much like the hitting coach. I can't take an average, below average infielder. I don't care who you are, Ron Washington or not, and turn him into an elite guy. It ain't happening. You try to make him serviceable, period.
All right. Like a lot of New England, I've been thinking about Drake Maye a lot this week. Okay, and this is, you're watching, it's a bad football team. That was an ugly loss, but he gave us hope, right? And you saw it from that touchdown at the end of the first half and some of the things he did running the ball to get out of, getting out of trouble in the pocket. He can make things happen, right? He's clearly a quarterback that is, if he stays healthy, which a big if, he's going to be able to do something. And people come away from that game, even Dan Shaughnessy said, it's a tough loss, but it gives us reason for hope. Dan Shaughnessy becomes Dan Roach all of a sudden overnight. But you look at the Red Sox, and like Jarren Duran to me kind of was that guy this year. If I watched this season in review, the one thing I came away with feeling was, hey, Jarren Duran has the potential to be a superstar. Was a superstar this year. We'll see if he can continue. Is Roman Anthony? Is there a guy in the Red Sox system right now who can get that kind of bump from Red Sox fans?
As much as Duran, you talk about these types of guys, it's just a different sport in that a quarterback is the most important position in the sport, as we saw with Tom Brady. So they've got the quarterback. They've got nothing else. The Red Sox, have a lot more tools, a lot more. They got, whether it's Bayo, Houck, and Crawford, whatever order you want to put them in, what you think they are, and Duran and Rafaela and Devers. So in Casas, I mean, there's a lot more hope with the Red Sox side of it. It's just different. Like once you have the quarterback, now you got to build around him, and it might take 3 or 4 years. And by the time that happens, now you got to pay him $60 million. So it's in a weird spot. They're rebuild right now, but the Red Sox are kind of hopefully on the outside of it, kind of now moving forward. Duran is probably the guy. He's probably the exciting guy you show up every single day and wows you.
Do they have the opening day starter in the system right now? Is next year's opening day starter on the roster?
No, I don't think they do. And if they do, it's because they gave Bayo it last year, and whoever the new guy is. But if it's Burns, he's in there. If it's Fried, I would think he's in there. If it's one of the guys from Seattle or a guy like Crochet in the White Sox, maybe it's Bayo, just to let him know it's still his team. But I think there's somebody there that competes with Bayo on top of that rotation and Houck on top of that rotation.
All right, last but not least, who wins the World Series and why?
Oh, God. I mean, we cover baseball. We have no clue, do we? Like, really? I mean, you watch these teams. I thought the Padres were the best team, that I saw all year long. I can't go Yankees. I still think they're flawed. And we'll see. Although Weaver, holy smokes.
Yeah.
If they win, it's going to be because of him, if you ask me. This guy is looks like Rivera all of a sudden. But I'm going to go Dodgers. Unfortunately, I'm going to go Dodgers. Although I'm rooting for the Mets and the Guardians.
I can't root for the Guardians because, and I can't root for the Yankees because it's just against everything I've ever stood for. But for baseball, Aaron Judge against Shohei Ohtani would be the best thing to happen to the sport in a very long time, right?
100%.
I mean,
yes.
It would just be, it would be all over everything. ESPN would actually pay attention to baseball. It'd be everything you need. I just need, if I'm going to say I want that to happen, I need to know in advance that the Yankees going to lose because I can't have the Yankees win the World Series.
Yeah, it's the best for baseball. I think the ratings, the TV would absolutely love it. Baseball won't be dead because I think the ratings will be pretty high for that. There'll be a lot of eyes on that. So I think baseball is hoping for that matchup.
Yeah, shout out Jared Carrabis, as every podcast has to do at some point. Lou, great stuff. We appreciate catching up and spending some time. Thanks, man.
All right, TC, you got it, buddy. Anytime, man. Enjoy Maine up there. Relax a little bit, will you?
Thank you. Trust me. I'm going to get the flannel shirt. I'll be wearing flannel every day from now till April. It's perfect. The great Lou Merloni with us here on the 310 to Left podcast. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you next time.